Viral restaurant scandal with Keanu Reeves. You know Keanu Reeves, right? The laid-back, kind-hearted action hero. The guy we all wish we could hang out with, and the face behind some of the most iconic roles in Hollywood. From The Matrix to John Wick, Keanu has built a reputation that goes far beyond his acting talent. But what if I told you that one night, in a swanky upscale restaurant, Keanu Reeves, yes, the guy we all love, was kicked out? Not because of bad behavior, not because of an outburst, but for something far worse. A misunderstanding, a mistake that nearly destroyed a career. Here's the kicker. The restaurant had no idea who they were dealing with until it was far too late. And by the time they realized, well, it was already over for them. Keanu was just being his humble, quiet self, but the world was about to turn upside down for the staff and management of that high-end eatery. Stay tuned to hear how this scandal began, how it spiraled out of control, and how the fallout led to the end of some major careers. Subscribe now to Mazer Bro and never miss a jaw-dropping story like this. It was a regular evening at one of LA's most exclusive dining spots, a place known for its gourmet food, impeccable service, and high-profile clientele. It was the kind of restaurant where people expect to rub elbows with A-listers and escape from the regular grind. And, of course, it was supposed to be the night Keanu Reeves was going to enjoy a peaceful dinner away from the prying eyes of the world. He wasn't looking for attention, and he certainly wasn't looking to cause a scene. Keanu had been in LA for a couple of days, doing some promotional work for his latest project. And like anyone else who's used to the spotlight, he enjoyed the rare opportunity to go unnoticed. But this night, that wasn't going to happen. The staff at this upscale restaurant had their standards. They prided themselves on exclusivity, the kind of place where only the right people dined. And when Keanu walked in, no one recognized him. The hostess, an overly ambitious young woman, greeted him with a pleasant smile, but immediately began eyeing him suspiciously. After all, a man in a faded hoodie and jeans with unkempt hair? Surely not a person deserving of a prime table in the most sought-after restaurant in the city. They had a list of important guests, and Keanu, at first glance, didn't fit the criteria. "You can wait in the lounge," the hostess said coldly, directing Keanu to a small corner near the door. Keanu, never one to make a fuss, complied. He sat, no problem. He wasn't looking for special treatment, just a quiet dinner. But little did he know, that decision would kick off a chain of events that would lead to a massive scandal. Minutes later, a manager came by. He was visibly flustered when he saw Keanu sitting there. "Is there an issue with the seating, sir?" the manager asked, looking around for any sign of dissatisfaction. Keanu, with his signature humility, waved him off and simply said, "No, no issue. Just enjoying the atmosphere." But it was clear that the staff felt otherwise. A few more minutes passed before the manager came back, this time with a different tone. "I'm afraid we don't typically seat people without a reservation," he said. "Do you mind if I show you to the bar?" Keanu, who had already been there for almost half an hour, was starting to feel the discomfort in the air. "Okay, Dad, I understand. But I think I'll leave," he said calmly, gathering his things. Before he could even grab his coat, the manager stepped in front of him, blocking his way. "Well, sir, I'm afraid we're going to have to ask you to leave," the manager said, his voice more stern. "We have a strict policy for customers who don't follow our reservation procedures." Keanu blinked in disbelief. He wasn't sure whether the manager had even recognized who he was at this point. He felt it wasn't worth explaining. In typical Keanu fashion, he said, "No worries. I'll go." And just like that, he was escorted out quietly without drama. The manager thought nothing of it. He didn't know it, but he had just made one of the biggest mistakes of his life. The night was supposed to be over. The restaurant had gotten rid of a non-important guest, or so they thought. But the story doesn't end there. Not even close. As Keanu walked out, it was clear the world didn't know what had just transpired. The man they had just kicked out was, in fact, a global icon. A star who had made his mark not just on the silver screen, but on the hearts of millions with his kindness, humility, and dedication. The restaurant staff thought they had handled it just like any other situation. They didn't realize that they had just caused a storm. But the storm wasn't going to hit them immediately. it would take time for the ripple effect to truly unfold. Within moments, social media began buzzing. It started with a simple tweet from a guest who had witnessed the whole thing. Someone had recognized Keanu, someone who had been sitting near the door. Did Keanu Reeves just get kicked out of a restaurant in LA for no reason? Hashtag, what is going on? The tweet read. It went viral instantly. At first, people thought it was a joke, a hoax. But then came the second tweet, then the third, then the video footage, and soon the story spread across the internet like wildfire. Hashtag Keanu Reeves, hashtag restaurant scandal, hashtag Hollywood fail. The media picked it up. News outlets across the globe ran with the headline. Keanu Reeves was kicked out of a high-end restaurant for no reason, they said. Bloggers and online influencers started calling out the restaurant, demanding answers. But still, the restaurant's management hadn't realized what they'd done. They were confused, stunned even, until the phone started ringing. Calls from other celebrities, managers, agents, and worse, calls from the public relations department of the restaurant itself, who had just started to receive messages from outraged patrons. I'll pause here. Would you like me to continue with the next part? 2. ChatGPT. Part 2. The reveal, 4,900 characters. The night was supposed to be over. The restaurant had gotten rid of a non-important guest, or so they thought. But the story doesn't end there. Not even close. As Keanu walked out, it was clear the world didn't know what had just transpired. The man they had just kicked out was, in fact, a global icon. A star who had made his mark not just on the silver screen, but on the hearts of millions with his kindness, humility, and dedication. The restaurant staff thought they had handled it, just like any other situation. They didn't realize that they had just caused a storm. But the storm wasn't going to hit them immediately. It would take time for the ripple effect to truly unfold. Within moments, social media began buzzing. It started with a simple tweet from a guest who had witnessed the whole thing. Someone had recognized Keanu, someone who had been sitting near the door. Did Keanu Reeves just get kicked out of a restaurant in LA for no reason? Hashtag, what is going on? The tweet read. It went viral instantly. At first, people thought it was a joke, a hoax. But then came the second tweet, then the third, then the video footage, and soon the story spread across the internet like wildfire. Hashtag Keanu Reeves, hashtag restaurant scandal, hashtag Hollywood fail. The media picked it up. News outlets across the globe ran with the headline. Keanu Reeves was kicked out of a high-end restaurant for no reason, they said. Bloggers and online influencers started calling out the restaurant, demanding answers. But still, the restaurant's management hadn't realized what they'd done. They were confused, stunned even, until the phone started ringing. Calls from other celebrities, managers, agents, and worse, calls from the public relations department of the restaurant itself, who had just started to receive messages from outraged patrons. The phone calls began to pile up. Do you have any idea what you just did? One of the restaurant's investors asked. Keanu Reeves is a global treasure. You just kicked out one of the most beloved figures in Hollywood. The restaurant's management tried to remain calm, insisting it was just a misunderstanding. But their attempt to justify their actions only made things worse. Then came the blow that would change everything. A call from Keanu's publicist. We need an apology, and we need it now, the publicist demanded. You've hurt Keanu, and if you don't make this right, the consequences will be huge. This could ruin your business. Do you understand that? The restaurant's owner, stunned and rattled, couldn't believe what was happening. He had never intended for things to get this far, but now the storm was upon them. Keanu, on the other hand, remained calm. He issued a short, polite statement on social media, saying, I was simply asked to leave a restaurant. I'm not angry, just a little disappointed in how things went. But I'm fine. But that was it. Keanu had stayed humble, just as he always did. The public, however, was not as forgiving. The restaurant's customers began to pull their reservations. The critics took to social media, slamming the restaurant for its treatment of Keanu, calling them out for their clear ignorance and arrogance in not recognizing who he was. As the news spread, it seemed like the whole world was now aware of what had happened. The restaurant had no idea what it was getting into. It wasn't just Keanu's loyal fan base who was furious. It was the Hollywood community as a whole. Several high-profile figures, including actors, directors, and producers, began tweeting their disappointment with the establishment. It wasn't just Keanu's fans. It was the entire entertainment industry that felt slighted. The tweets and posts from celebrities started rolling in. "I was a customer at that restaurant before, but never again. This is ridiculous," tweeted an actor who had worked with Keanu in the past. "Keanu is the definition of grace. This restaurant should be ashamed," wrote another Hollywood heavyweight. The calls for a boycott grew louder. More media outlets started covering the scandal, each one detailing the restaurant's failure to recognize who they were dealing with. The fallout from the restaurant's blunder began to snowball faster than anyone could anticipate. What had started as a minor incident, a misunderstanding over a simple reservation, turned into a full-fledged scandal that rocked the restaurant industry and Hollywood alike. For the first time in its history, the restaurant's name was not being associated with its fine dining or exclusive atmosphere. Instead, it was now being mentioned in the same breath as scandal, disrespect, and shame. The backlash was swift, unrelenting, and utterly devastating. Keanu's fans, fueled by their adoration for him and his reputation for being one of the nicest celebrities in the industry, began mobilizing on social media. Hashtags like hashtag boycott the restaurant and hashtag Keanu deserves better flooded Twitter. Instagram influencers and YouTubers jumped on the bandwagon, creating content that criticized the restaurant's behavior and calling for a complete boycott. Imagine being so out of touch that you don't recognize Keanu Reeves. It's like they didn't even Google who had made a reservation, one viral tweet read. By the time the next morning arrived, the restaurant was dealing with a full-blown crisis. The initial shock had turned into outrage, and customers were making sure their voices were heard. Every table reservation for the next 2 weeks had been canceled. Yelp reviews, once full of glowing praise, now flooded the site with 1-star ratings, each comment echoing the same sentiment. This restaurant doesn't deserve to exist. The restaurant's owners, who had always prided themselves on their high standards of service, suddenly found themselves under the harshest spotlight they had ever experienced. They quickly realized that their carefully constructed image, built on exclusivity and luxury, was now being dismantled piece by piece in front of the entire world. By noon, the restaurant's PR team had issued a public statement, attempting to explain the situation. "We deeply regret the misunderstanding that took place last night. We never intended to disrespect anyone, especially someone as beloved as Mr. Keanu Reeves. We have reached out to Mr. Reeves and his team to apologize for our actions, and we are doing everything we can to make things right." But the apology came too late. The public wasn't interested in words. They were interested in actions, and the restaurant had failed to show any recognition of their mistake until the damage was done. And the more they tried to explain themselves, the worse things got. It became apparent that this wasn't just a mistake. It was a massive PR disaster that would leave scars on their reputation for years to come. Behind the scenes, the restaurant's investors were scrambling. The restaurant had always been a profitable venture, catering to the rich and famous, with a strong following of celebrities and high-profile individuals. But now, it seemed like they were losing everything in an instant. Several key investors called emergency meetings, demanding answers and making it clear that they were not happy with how the restaurant had handled the situation. One of the investors, a powerful Hollywood mogul, pulled his funding altogether. If you can't handle a simple situation with a guest like Keanu Reeves, what happens when someone with real power comes in? "This is a PR nightmare, and I want out," he stated bluntly. The effect of the boycott was immediate. Big-name chefs and restaurateurs who had once praised the establishment distanced themselves. Celebrities who had frequently dined there began to make it clear, both publicly and privately, that they would no longer show their faces in the restaurant. The social media pressure was so immense that even those who were somewhat neutral or indifferent to the situation found themselves forced to pick a side. It didn't take long for news outlets across the country to start digging deeper into the restaurant's practices. Journalists began questioning the restaurant's treatment of celebrities, especially those who weren't a list in the public eye. Rumors of favoritism and rude behavior toward regular customers surfaced. What had initially appeared to be a minor slip-up now began to seem like part of a much bigger problem, a culture of elitism and entitlement within the walls of the restaurant. For the next few days, the restaurant became a focal point for news cycles. It wasn't long before Keanu's fans, now riled up by the public apology and the media attention, began flooding the restaurant's social media accounts with messages of support for Keanu and demands for accountability from the restaurant. Keanu is a man of integrity. He doesn't deserve this treatment. You've just ruined your reputation for nothing, one tweet read. Get your act together. Stop pretending like you didn't mess up. Hashtag Keanu deserves better. Another post followed. But despite the intense pressure, the restaurant refused to back down. They issued another statement on their social media accounts, but the public was no longer listening. The damage had already been done. The headlines were relentless, and each new comment and viral video served as another nail in the coffin of the once prestigious eatery. In the days that followed, it was reported that bookings at other high-end restaurants, competitors of the now infamous establishment, had skyrocketed. Celebrities and food critics alike were flocking to the other restaurants, avoiding the once popular spot that had kicked Keanu out. It became apparent that the restaurant wasn't just losing business, it was losing its entire reputation. The real kicker came when Keanu himself was asked about the situation in an interview with a major talk show host. With his usual calm and dignity, Keanu responded, "I've been in situations before where things go wrong. I don't hold grudges and I don't want to focus on negativity, but I also believe in respecting others, no matter who they are. I don't want to dwell on the restaurant's mistake, but I do hope they learn from it." And with that, Keanu, the man who could have let the situation turn into a public war, did what he always did best. He diffused the situation with grace. But the restaurant? They couldn't escape the fallout. The situation was beginning to spiral beyond repair. Despite the public's ongoing outrage, the restaurant's owners stubbornly clung to their belief that they could weather the storm. They didn't realize how badly their brand had been damaged until it was too late. Social media continued to hammer them, and the media spotlight was unwavering. Every day, news stories emerged about the restaurant's elitist behavior. Each story piled onto the mountain of damage they had already accumulated. The backlash was unlike anything they had ever faced, and soon it wasn't just customers turning their backs on them. Competitors began circling, eager to pick up the pieces. It was clear that the restaurant's owners were losing control of their once ironclad empire. They had always relied on exclusivity, high-profile guests, and a sense of invulnerability that came with being a celebrity haven. But that sense of safety was now shattered, and it was starting to have serious financial consequences. By the end of the week, the restaurant's financial reports were grim. Revenues had dropped by over 40%. Regulars who used to frequent the place were no longer booking tables, and the clientele they had so carefully curated was abandoning them in droves. The damage was pervasive. It wasn't just about the boycott anymore. Word of mouth was no longer their ally. The idea that the restaurant was a must-visit for the elite was crumbling. The worst part was the public relations team. Once heralded as one of the best in the business, they were now scrambling to control the narrative. Press releases were issued daily, each one a desperate attempt to salvage what little they could. The problem was that no one was listening. Their words didn't hold weight anymore. The public wasn't interested in apologies or backpedaling. They had already made their judgment. The restaurant had disrespected Keanu Reeves, and that was unforgivable. It wasn't just about the meal or the food at this point. It was about principle. People were upset because it felt like the restaurant had shown contempt for someone who didn't deserve it. And once people decided they'd been wronged, they didn't just walk away. They made sure everyone knew how they felt. Behind closed doors, the owners held an emergency meeting to try to salvage whatever was left of their business. Their brand, built on exclusivity and elegance, was being torn apart by the backlash. But it wasn't just the financial hit that was hitting them hard. It was the loss of their image, the loss of what they had worked so tirelessly to cultivate. "People have been eating at other places," one of the owners said, rubbing his temples in frustration. "We've lost our cachet." They're calling us the restaurant that kicked out Keanu. It's over. Not if we do something about it, another owner argued. We still have time. We need to get in front of this. We need Keanu to forgive us. If we fix this, we can recover. But the reality was sinking in. Keanu, as gracious as he had been in his response, wasn't going to be the answer they needed. The public had already moved on from the idea of fixing things. For them, the damage was done. The restaurant's actions spoke louder than any apology ever could. In an attempt to salvage their reputation, they reached out to a major PR firm, one known for turning around the reputations of high-profile businesses in crisis. The PR firm came with a plan, but the execution was slow, deliberate, and expensive. What they didn't account for was how deep the public had already dug into the restaurant's past. Old stories began surfacing. Journalists unearthed instances where other customers had felt disrespected by the staff. They found stories about unfair practices, where reservations were given preferential treatment to celebrities while everyday patrons were left to fend for themselves. This wasn't just about one incident anymore. It was about a pattern of behavior that went back years. The restaurant's mistakes, once swept under the rug, were now being exposed one by one. As the days went on, Keanu's fans continued to rally behind him, creating more viral content and using their platforms to voice their support. Celebrities took to social media as well, expressing their disbelief over how Keanu had been treated. Some even went as far as posting old photos of themselves dining at the restaurant with messages like, "If they can disrespect Keanu, they don't deserve our business." It became increasingly clear that no matter how hard the restaurant tried to spin the situation, the public had made up its mind. There was no coming back from the scandal. Even the once celebrated restaurant critics who had given glowing reviews started to distance themselves from the restaurant, calling out its toxic culture and toxic treatment of guests. A few weeks later, a large corporate conglomerate that had been quietly eyeing the restaurant's assets made its move. They offered a buyout offer that the owners couldn't refuse. They were forced to sell the business at a fraction of its previous value. What had been a thriving, elite establishment was now on the verge of becoming a cautionary tale. The new owners, with a completely different vision in mind, took the restaurant's name off the building and rebranded it entirely. The concept of luxury and exclusivity that had once defined the space was replaced with something entirely new, an open, inclusive, and diverse dining experience that embraced all customers. It was a sharp contrast to what the restaurant had been before. Meanwhile, Keanu Reeves, ever the humble and kind soul, moved on. The entire ordeal had left a lasting impression on him, but he didn't dwell on it. As he always did, he focused on his work, on his charity, and on his life outside of the media circus. He had weathered the storm with dignity and grace, and it hadn't hurt his career in the slightest. If anything, it made him more beloved. In the end, the restaurant was nothing more than a sad reminder of what happens when a business loses sight of what really matters: respect, kindness, and understanding. The story of Keanu's restaurant scandal wasn't just about a mistake made in the heat of the moment. It was about how one small action can unravel an empire if you're not careful. It had been months since the restaurant's public downfall, and the ripple effects were still felt throughout the food industry. The once coveted eatery, which had enjoyed a long reign as one of the most exclusive destinations for celebrities and the elite, was now a mere shadow of its former self. But for the owners, the real consequences were not just the loss of their prestigious restaurant. Their entire reputations had been tarnished beyond repair. The financial hit was one thing, but the professional destruction was even more profound. They had made the cardinal mistake of disrespecting someone as universally loved as Keanu Reeves, and the world was not about to let them forget it. The fallout had seeped into every corner of their careers. Other high-profile establishments refused to work with them, wary of the negative publicity they'd bring. Former investors, who had once viewed the restaurant as a profitable venture, began pulling out, unwilling to associate themselves with a brand that had been so publicly humiliated. The backlash didn't just affect the restaurant. It affected every business venture they were involved in. What had once been a lucrative network of connections now felt like a prison of distrust. The owners were blacklisted from the very circles they had once dominated. It wasn't just about their restaurant anymore. It was about their tarnished image, and they couldn't shake it. To make matters worse, a documentary filmmaker approached the former owners with an offer to create a full-length film about the scandal. The documentary promised to dive deep into the backstory of the restaurant, the owner's rise to fame, and the dramatic fall from grace that followed. But what was intended to be a way for the owners to redeem themselves turned into a nightmare. The filmmakers had no interest in providing a sympathetic view. They wanted drama, intrigue, and, most importantly, the brutal truth. The documentary went viral within weeks of its release, further amplifying the damage. For the owners, the movie was the final nail in the coffin. They had hoped for some sort of redemption, but all they got was a magnification of their arrogance, privilege, and entitlement. The public wasn't forgiving, and they made it clear through social media, news outlets, and, most importantly, their wallets. Business after business refused to associate with them. Meanwhile, Keanu Reeves remained largely unscathed. His fans continued to support him, and his career continued to thrive. The scandal hadn't harmed his brand at all. In fact, if anything, his handling of the situation had only made him more beloved. His ability to stay calm, composed, and kind in the face of adversity was exactly why he had such a loyal following. People saw him as an example of how to handle a situation with grace, even when the world was watching. Keanu's refusal to participate in the drama only intensified the contrast between him and the restaurant's owners. While they scrambled to salvage their reputation, Keanu simply kept moving forward with his life, working on his projects, and continuing to quietly give back to his community. In stark contrast, the former restaurant owners were left floundering, constantly looking over their shoulders. They had learned the hard way that respect for people, regardless of their celebrity status, is essential to maintaining a business in the public eye. Their arrogance had cost them everything, and now they were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered careers. As the months passed, the public slowly moved on to the next scandal, but the restaurant's legacy remained forever tainted. The building was sold off, and a new restaurant moved in, adopting a completely different approach. It was the opposite of the exclusive, highbrow dining experience that had been at the heart of the old establishment. The new owners focused on inclusivity, bringing in a broader range of clientele and creating a welcoming atmosphere for all. Despite the restaurant's physical transformation, the damage had been done. The history of that particular space would forever be linked to the infamous Keanu Reeves incident, and nothing could erase that. For the former owners, their story was one of hubris and fall from grace. Once the darlings of the high society dining scene, they were now shadows of their former selves, struggling to reclaim any semblance of their previous life. Their days of luxury and influence were gone, replaced with the grim reality of public shame and financial ruin. But there was a strange irony in the whole situation. In trying to push Keanu out of their restaurant, they had unknowingly driven their own downfall. The very thing they had tried to control, to manipulate, had turned on them. Keanu Reeves, with his quiet dignity, had managed to keep his career intact while the restaurant's owners were left with nothing. As they slowly retreated from the public eye, the lesson was clear. In the world of the rich and famous, one misstep, one moment of disrespect, could bring everything crashing down. For Keanu, the ordeal had been a mere blip on his career radar, but for the restaurant owners, it was the end of everything they had worked so hard to build. The scandal was over, but its effects lingered. And in the end, the legacy of the restaurant would always be remembered for one thing: their failure to treat a man with kindness and respect. The end of the story was not just about the downfall of a restaurant or the humiliating exposure of its owners. It was about how an arrogant mistake, fueled by greed and entitlement, can unravel a carefully constructed world of privilege. For Keanu Reeves, the storm had passed. For the restaurant's owners, the fallout was just beginning. Months after the documentary aired and the media frenzy had subsided, the owners still found themselves in a battle they couldn't win. Attempts to rebuild their reputations failed miserably, Every press conference, every attempt to salvage their public image was met with ridicule, no matter what they said or did. The public couldn't unsee the moment when they had humiliated one of Hollywood's most beloved stars. The irony wasn't lost on the public either. The owners had wanted to create an atmosphere of exclusivity, a place where only the elite were welcome. Yet, in their attempt to bar Keanu from entering, they had failed to see that the very thing they sought to protect, their elitist image, was actually the very reason their business had crumbled. The new restaurant that had taken over the building had become a smashing success. It thrived on the very principles that the previous owners had rejected: inclusivity, warmth, and respect for all. The new owners capitalized on the public's need for a fresh start, distancing themselves from the scandal while embracing a more community-oriented model. They opened their doors to everyone, no matter their celebrity status, creating an environment where even the regular people felt like VIPs. While the new restaurant flourished, the old owners were left to pick up the pieces. They tried launching a new venture, a luxury hotel chain, but their reputation preceded them. Investors hesitated, and when the media caught wind of their new project, it quickly became a target of mockery. No one was willing to bet on their ability to succeed, not after the disaster they had created. Each new business they attempted to launch crashed before it could even get off the ground. Keanu, on the other hand, remained untouched. He had continued to work on his projects, embracing the opportunities that came his way, while quietly moving past the drama that had surrounded him. His fans continued to adore him, and his humility and resilience made him even more of a beloved figure. His name was still synonymous with kindness, respect, and unshakable integrity. People looked at the way he handled the entire situation as a testament to his character. In a strange twist of fate, Keanu's involvement in the restaurant scandal ended up boosting his career in ways no one had expected. He was approached by various charitable organizations, filmmakers, and even high-end brands who saw in him not just a star, but a symbol of the values they wanted to represent: fairness, humility, and genuine kindness. While the owners of the restaurant languished in financial ruin, their reputations permanently tarnished, Keanu's career reached new heights. A series of successful projects followed, including major film roles and high-profile partnerships with philanthropic causes. It became clear to everyone that, in this world, integrity and respect held more power than anything money or status could buy. The former restaurant owners were never able to fully escape the shadow of their mistake. They became the subject of late-night talk shows, documentaries, and gossip columns. Each new story about them was less about their former success and more about their spectacular failure. They had crossed the line, and there was no coming back from it. Years later, when the dust had settled and the media had moved on to new scandals, the former owners of the restaurant remained a cautionary tale. Their names were synonymous with failure, and their stories served as a grim reminder of how quickly a person's world could collapse if they failed to treat others with respect. As for Keanu, he remained an icon, admired not just for his talent on screen, but for the way he carried himself off-screen. The restaurant scandal, for him, had become a blip in the timeline of his extraordinary life. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone. His kindness had already earned him the highest reward: the respect and love of millions of people around the world. The final lesson of this saga was simple. In the world of the rich and famous, where power and privilege often reign supreme, it's kindness and humility that ultimately define a person's legacy. The restaurant's former owners had learned that lesson the hard way, while Keanu Reeves continued to show the world that integrity is more valuable than any exclusive reservation or star-studded event. For those still wondering about the fate of the restaurant, the building was eventually sold off to developers, and the space was repurposed for something entirely new. The scandal faded into history, but the lesson remained embedded in the minds of anyone who had followed the story. It was a reminder that no amount of money, fame, or influence could protect a person from the consequences of their actions, especially when they cross paths with someone who, like Keanu, knew how to do things the right way. And that, in the end, was the true power of humility.